and let everyone in. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. Thanks for joining us and learning more about working with data sets in Excel. Today, we have Doug Cohen, who's our Director of Educational Technologies and kind of overall Excel guru, at least for me when I have questions. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know, if you're new to Tech Tuesday, thanks for joining. If you have any questions at all during the session, please feel free to put it in the chat because we do have quite a few people registered and attending today's session. We just want to limit any background noises, so we have muted everyone, but we'll be stopping periodically to answer questions during the presentation. Also, I am recording today's session, so after the session is over, I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone later in the day with a link to this recording so you can go back and refer to anything that we've discussed, as well as some helpful links that you can go look at your own pace and, just kind of review the material and test it out for yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Doug. Doug, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Vanessa, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday and happy election day. So before we get started with talking about Excel, let me just put a plug out to, please go vote if you haven't already done so. All right, so the way we're going to do today's session, I'm going to share my desktop. I have some PowerPoint slides to help guide me through the conversation and also a mock Excel file. So as I hit each topic, I'll try to then, describe what we're doing in PowerPoint and then jump into Excel and do a demo. So I'll try to do that in real time. As Vanessa said, please feel free to put any questions in the chat and I will try to address them as we're on that topic. And since this is what seems to be a bit of a running series now, we're going to focus on some of the basics in Excel to start. And then we'll get into a little bit of advanced with comparing data sets and using some formulas to do that. And then, at the end, as we're doing, additional questions, please feel free to put any topics that you might like to see in future Tech Tuesdays for Excel. And, we'll use that to guide another session on Excel. So without further ado, here is my desktop, and you should see the PowerPoint slide and the Excel file in the background, and that's how we'll go through and work through the session. So this is just what we're going to cover. We're going to cover very quickly sorting and filtering, very much common sense in Excel, and most people are probably aware of how to do so. Formatting, again, very similar and basic skills that everyone hopefully knows. Then we'll get into some of the more advanced features, conditional formatting, using paste special, which has lots of fun functionality in it that most people may not know about. Rotating content between rows and columns or vice versa. Think about, when you've received an Excel data set that you need, but you need it in a different format. You need to switch it around. There's a really easy way to do that. And then we'll close out with comparing data, which I think every one of us struggles, and hopefully I've put together a model that might work for you going forward. So let's start with the most simplistic thing to do in Excel, which is just data sorting. So for each of the data sets that we're going to look at, I just used some mock data. So you can see in the screenshot on the left-hand side, this is 1,000 rows of data that has an ID column, a first name column, a last name column, an email address column, and an IP address column. All fake data, but good enough for us to play with. So in Excel, the easiest way to do it is go into the ribbon, go to the Data tab, and use the Sort option. And you can see I've highlighted the button. And you can also go up to, if you're a Mac user, go up to the Data menu, choose Sort, and you'll get the prompt where you can manually select through what columns you might want to do. So if we jump over to the Excel sheet, you can see that I have this mock data set sorted by last name at this point. So if I do a select all and go up to Data and Sort on Excel, the menu pops up. And let's see if I can move this menu very quickly. Bear with me 1 second as I get my Zoom controls out of the way to get to the menu. Apologies for that delay. And now we can do a manual sort. So my list does have headers. You can see I have a header row here. So I'm going to leave this checked. If I uncheck it, it would just use the full columns. But now we can sort by the column. And in this case, let's choose ID. And let's do smallest to largest. And you can see that I just took the entire data set and it did not sort. So we'll do that again. And we're going to sort by ID, smallest to largest. And there we go. And now you'll see the whole data set switched. And you can see on the Excel spreadsheet, we're now sorted 1 all the way down through 1,000, smallest to largest. And we're no longer sorted by last name. So just a great way to quickly manipulate the data if you want to look at it in a different way. For each of the topics, what I've tried to do is make the PowerPoint slides just useful as a guide. So this is the Microsoft documentation on sorting, and there will be a link to the Microsoft documentation on the web. So should you want to print the slides or look at the slides at a later point in time after Vanessa sends them, you can use this as a reference guide as well. So let's move on to filtering. So filtering is done in a very similar fashion where you'll go to the data tab in your ribbon and you'll click on the filter button. There's also an advanced filter option where you can show unique records. But we're going to go through and we're just going to take that same data set, and I have a filtered example, and we'll unfilter it and refilter it and look at some of the different options that you can do. So if we go into Excel, I have a tab here called filtering, and you can see that this is filtered by the last name. You can see the icon has changed. So if I click on the filter icon, you'll notice that screenshot pops up, and you can see that we can choose ascending, descending. We have a lot of options that we can choose. We can choose a specific record. So if we select all, that essentially clears the filter and the entire data set came. This is a small data set, so it's not necessarily the best example to show some of the features, but if we just want to show one record by last name, we can just unselect everyone and select the one record, and you notice the data set changes. Another way you can do this, in a really much more powerful way as you have larger data sets, would be to look at the choose option, where you can choose last names that begin with, let's say, AI. And you notice that we now restricted it to 2 because we have two records with the last name that starts with AI. So this gives you a way to take data sets and depending on the values in the data, really do some manipulation. So if we want to clear this filter, I'll do another begins with, and I'm actually going to filter on a different field. Let's filter on IP address and do begins with, and we'll say 1. And that's going to give us all records that begin with an IP address with a 1. And now you see we have a large data set here. And if we change that to 2, it'll swap the data set out. And I also saw some IP addresses in this that started with 0. So you can just see how very quickly you can use criteria in your data to manipulate the data. All right, so we will move on to cell formatting. But before we do, just bear with me. I will see if there's any questions on. There is a question in the chat, which you may or may not see depending on how my Zoom settings are. When do you prefer to use sorting over filtering and vice versa? So let me start. I think this is going to be a matter of preference. For me personally, I like to look at data sets in an organized fashion. And so I use sorting to get my data in a way that I want to look at it by default. So if we look at this mock data set, this is possibly a way that you might want to look at it, right? The IDs in numerical order. But to be honest, these IDs don't help me very much. Like if I was looking for an individual, who cares what the IDs are? I would be looking at, either first name or last name. So I would default the data set. I would come in here, and if I were looking at it, I would do data, and I would sort, and I would sort by probably last name as my start. And that's going to give me an easy way to look through the data set. So I know, if I happen to be looking for someone with the same last name as me as Cohen, I could easily scroll down, apologies for the mad scrolling, and get to an area to see if there is someone, and that's very quick. Filtering gives you another way to do that, where you could, then narrow by last name. But if we look at the filtering here, so again, I'm going to just do data, and I'm going to auto filter so we can add the filters. This list of last names is approximately 1,000. So I could use filtering to then come here and look for a last name, come here, choose, and say, does it equal Cohen? And get none. But to be honest, sorting gave me such an easy way to do that I would use sorting over filtering. So I think your data is going to drive when to use filtering over sorting, or when to use them in combination. I hope that helps explain. Okay. There is a question. You have a highlight a whole set to make sure. Let me read that out loud. You used to have to highlight the whole data set to make sure that you don't mix up cells. Is that no longer necessary? It depends what you're doing. If you're trying to sort an entire data set, yes, you'll want to highlight the whole data set, or you'll need to highlight an entire column to do sorting. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but you still need to ensure you have the whole data set highlighted. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and we can come back and answer more questions, because I see they might be coming in. So cell formatting, let's just go into cell formatting. So this is a straightforward thing to do in Excel. We all have data sets. Sometimes we want to highlight something so that when a user comes to our data set, they immediately see something. So I'm going to quickly highlight a row to walk through some different ways you can do cell formatting. So if you're on a Mac, you can go up to the Format menu. You can choose Cells, and you will get a Format Cell window. And so there's all sorts of different data types, and I'm not going to spend too much time in data types, but you can see if you need it to be numbers, if you need it to be currency, you can have it, have a dollar symbol. You can choose decimal places. Accounting, you can make sure that it is in a certain format for accounting versus currency, slight differences in how you do it. But I'm going to spend a little more time in the aesthetics of it. So alignment, you can vertically center, you can horizontally center, so you can move the data. And so I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to center it. Vertical alignment, you're not going to see much different. It is currently lined up to the bottom of the cell, but if you choose middle or center, that's going to put it in the middle of your cell. So I made the row bigger, which I can do. I will do that afterwards. It'll go into the middle. You can change your font size. So say we want to use the Weill Cornell font of 1898 sans. We want to make it italic. We want to make it slightly bigger at 14 point. Let's change the color. And we can add or change a border. So I'm going to pick some variant of a dotted line. And I'm going to change the color. So let's do a different color. Now you do notice on the right, you see a preview of the border, and it did not reflect the new changes, which is an orange dotted line. And that is because I chose the colors after I chose the border. So the easiest way to do that is just click on the different border lines, and you will see that it changes. And so now I've changed the border, and it will be orange and dotted. If you want a background color, you can choose background color or a background pattern. I'll choose a light gray just to make it look a little different. And protection is whether you want to lock cells or not, or hide cells. We're just going to leave them as they are at this point and hit OK. And you notice that we did get some changing. It centered it. I thought I changed the color, but I did not. So I will change the color just so we can do it. You can also do this from the home ribbon and choose your various icons. So we'll change the color. I mentioned the vertical alignment. So what I'm going to do, just so you can see how that vertical alignment works, if I make this row bigger, it's now double the height. But because I vertically aligned it to center, you notice that it took and put it in the middle of the cell, whereas the default was bottom. So if I make this row the same height, it defaults and stays at the bottom. So just some ways that you can manipulate the look, the layout, if you want some extra white space to do things. That is a good way to do it. So while we stay on cell formatting, let's talk about conditional formatting, where you can do this in a much more rules-oriented way. So there's the ability to create rules to highlight cells, and you can do much more than highlight, but I'm just going to focus on highlighting today because that really gets us into a good tool to use as we compare data sets. So I will start with a conditional formatting example that I have here, and you can see that if I recall the way I created these rules, any IP address starting with 2 is going to show up as red. Any IP address starting with 0 is going to show up as green. And if I highlight my data set, and there's the option for conditional formatting, if I choose the menu and go to Manage Rules, you will see that I have two rules, and you'll see exactly what I said. Those that start with 0, those that start with 2. I'm going to add a new rule, and we'll do one that for the IP addresses that start with 3, just because it's a great way to walk through it. So come to the bottom, we'll hit plus. In style, we're going to choose classic. And we're going to choose format cells that contain. And so what we want is format cells that contain specific text starting with or beginning with 0. And we're going to choose a different formatting color. So instead of red, because we're already using red, let's do a custom format. And you'll see a very similar menu pop up for how we just did cell formatting. So we're going to choose, let's choose an orange font with no border. And let's do a lighter orange background. And so now this rule says format cells that contain specific text beginning with 0. So, and I said we would do 3. So let's do 3. So for any IP address that starts with 3, it should show up as orange. So I hit OK. You see the rule is now applied. I'm going to hit OK. And we see now that we have an orange conditional format. We're also going to have IDs because I did it for the whole data set, not just the IP address column. So that rule should be adjusted really to only go on this column. And that is something you can come back. If I highlight the data set to manage rules, I can come back and edit my rule by selecting it, hitting edit rule. And I should actually delete it and recreate it just for that column. Or I can do the applies with and edit that. Sorry, my apologies. You see I can change it here. So in this case, let's just do column E to column E and hit OK. And now you see that it no longer applies to the IDs, but it does apply to the IP address. So sorry, I definitely butchered that demo a little bit, but it gives you an idea of how to do conditional formatting and how to fix conditional formatting if you do it incorrectly. And bear with me, I'm going to just look and see some of the questions and maybe address anything that is there. Okay, so one question, sometimes when I'm entering information into a data set, if I change information, the cell changes to number signs. So number signs is based on width typically. So I will try to see if I can address that. Okay, so you see I just slid this. If I take column E and I format it, do format cells and choose number, this might not work because of the decimal places. So the number signs is when you have number formatted cells. So if you do format number, this is not exactly numbers because there's multiple periods in it. When it's too short, you'll see number signs indicating that it's telling you that there's a number, but you can't see it. The easiest thing to do, double click on the right column and it will auto width it, or just take your column and slide the width to make it larger, and you'll see the number. Okay, let's see. So that question was answered. My computer has some issues and I cannot hear the sound. We'll address that later. How do you highlight everything so fast was one of the questions. So when you're on an Excel spreadsheet, there's using select all. So if I'm going to click once, you'll see my cursor is highlighting an ID. If I do edit, select all, it'll highlight the table directly. So this is actually grabbing all 5 rows of, all 5 columns of data and selecting it for me. You're not seeing my mouse do it. I am using, Control A or Command A if you're on a Mac to do select all. Where would you find the conditional feature when you're using the Excel web application? That question, I will have to double check. I don't tend to use the Excel web interface often, but it's very likely on the home ribbon. But I will have to double check, and we can follow up with the answers to that. If I make a change to a cell and it turns to a number sign, it stays that way. Again, I think that's a cell width issue, but maybe we can look at that specifically at the end. Okay, I think we're caught up on questions for now. Keep them coming, and I'll continue on. So paste special. So I think we all use copy paste for lots of things in our everyday activities where we're grabbing data from one location and moving it to another. Excel has a feature called paste special, which is a really, really, really valuable feature. And so what you're seeing on the PowerPoint slide is a list of options that you have when you do a paste special. So you can paste all, you can paste just formula, you can paste values, you can paste validations, everything except borders. And then there's even more. You can have it do math for you. You could have it do transposing or changing columns to rows. So what you see on the right, again, these are Mac screenshots, but when you do edit paste special, after you have copied content to your clipboard, you have all these options. And they're really cool and really can make some things much easier to do. So I'll start with a couple that are just really ones that I use every day. So if you paste formulas, that's a great way to paste a formula without getting any of the cell formatting. And I'm going to jump over to a different one, if I can find my mouse, just to show you an example of what I mean. If I take this ID cell and I copy it to my clipboard and I paste it directly below, it copied the formatting. And now you see that I have this ID of 613 formatted in a way that makes no sense for what I'm attempting to do. However, if I take this and copy it to my clipboard and now go up to Edit, Paste Special, and choose Formulas, and I hit OK, I've pasted the formula that I wanted to copy without pasting the format. So in the case of what we're going to cover when we talk about comparing sheets, I actually am going to create a formula. I'm going to copy it to do the row with all the formatting, and then I'm going to use a paste special to paste the rest. And that's going to give me the ability to create a nice looking data set very quickly, very easily. Another one that is a huge time saver is values. If you ever have to hand someone a spreadsheet, but maybe the formulas might be overly complicated or might cause confusion, you just want to turn around and give them the data that's in the spreadsheet, you can take the data, and I'm just going to select all. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to quickly add a new sheet here. You see sheet 1. And if I do edit, paste special, values, and paste, you notice that every cell has the data, and you can see the data in the function bar here. However, if I look at cell C7 in my original data set, it was driven by a formula. So you can use your formulas to create data, and then if you want to hand it to someone, do a paste special as values, and you can give them just clean data, and you don't have to give the formulas or anything complicated. This is also a great way if you're using Excel to create a data set, but maybe you have to save it as a CSV or a comma separated value file. do paste special to get a clean data set, and then you can hand that over. Another fun one that I was playing with earlier, just to show you another example of paste special. I'm going to use this data set in a few minutes, but I'm going to use an example. What if we want to take all of these highlighted fields and we want to multiply them by the value in this cell, which is 3.5. So you could have, a data set that you need to multiply it. A really fast way to do this is using paste special. So I'm going to copy the cell that has 3.5 in it, and I'm going to highlight all those cells. And if I do edit, paste special, and I do multiply, and I hit OK, you will now notice that it took all those cells and multiplied them by 3.5. Now, that was super fast to do a bunch of cells, whereas, normally you might have to do, or you might think you have to do a formula where you would say equals this cell value times this cell value and do this across the board. So it's just a really fast way to do some things that we might normally do. So lots of options in paste special. And you can see you can add, you can subtract, you can multiply, you can divide. And the next one that I want to highlight is transpose.
Oh,
And
hey, Doug, we got
sure.
a quick question about paste special before you move on. Can you do the paste special and then it would create another column for those values?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So let me go into this one. So here's an example. So if I want to take and highlight the IP address column, for lack of a better example, and just, I'm going to copy it to my clipboard. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do it off in column H. I can do edit, paste special. Sorry, that did not do what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. We'll grab it from here again. I'm just going to try to grab a data set quickly. Copy that, edit, paste special, values, and you can create it as a new column. And you can do that on the same sheet. I do that all the time, whereas I might have a formula that I want to convert where, I would do it here, or actually here, where I have formulas, and I would just simply take this column, copy it, come here, do edit, paste special, values. And I think this is actually a better example to do it. And you see that it immediately changed it to text versus formulas. So you absolutely can do that. And that is something I use every day. While I'm paused, Vanessa, were there any other questions I might need to go through?
There was one that I noticed. It refers to conditional formatting. So I don't know if you want to hold it to the end or answer it now.
Let's hold it to the end.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So transposing, or converting rows to columns. So, and I'll use that number data set. Sorry, I just have to find the data set, the rows to column data set. So there has been a lot of times where I need to work with data, and I would assume that lots of people on the call might be in the same boat, where they have to work with data, but the data is provided to them. So they get the data set and then they're asked to do something with it. And the first thing you go is, oh, wow, I wish it was in a different format. I wish the way it was laid out was in columns versus rows, or in rows versus columns. And so using paste special, we can do that very quickly. So I'm just going to highlight this entire data set, and I'm going to copy it to my clipboard. And we notice we have categories across the top, we have people across the bottom. But what if we want to know row per row what the category is? So I'm going to click once in this, I'm going to hit edit, paste special, and I'm just going to choose transpose. And you'll now notice it immediately turned around and took the data and reversed it. So now if I look at this top table from left to right, person one, I can see all of their numbers, or values assigned to the person. However, very quickly, by simply doing a transpose, I can look at all the values assigned to the category left to right versus top to bottom. Where I think this becomes a huge value add is in a lot of times when you're writing code against Excel spreadsheets, they flow from top to bottom, and each row is a record that you're working with. So, in this top data set, you would be able to act on it on a per person, whereas in this one, you would be acting on it on a per category, looking at each row. So it's just a great way to manipulate the data, kind of flip it around without having to do it manually. So I did want to highlight that one on Pay Special. All right. Since we're already at 12:30, let me move on to comparing data sheets. And I'll talk about a couple different ways to do it, and then I will open up to questions. So in Excel by default, and there is some pretty substantial differences on PCs and Macs. So I do want to highlight that. But one of the ways you can do the most simplistic form of comparing data sets is put them side by side. And if you've not done that in Excel, there's a way to actually have it arrange windows for you to do side by side. So I'm going to quickly go into Excel. I'm going to take data set 1, and I have it here. And so it'll stay in this window. I'm going to take data set 2, and I'm going to go to View, New Window. And you notice it popped open a new window. I happen to have all my Excel sheets for this demonstration at 150%. And I'm not going to do it because it's going to change the layout of my screen, and that's going to distract me while I'm continuing to talk. But in this view, I have the arrange option. And if I choose vertical and click OK, it's going to take my 2 data sets and put them side by side. And that's going to give you a very quick view, like what you're seeing in the PowerPoint slide, where you have data set 1 on the left, data set 2 on the right, and that would give you the ability to compare them. Now, as much as I don't like to say, PCs over Macs or Macs over PCs, this is a clear advantage on the PC side, because in the PC option of Excel, you have the ability to select an option to have them scroll together. On a Mac, you're actually scrolling independently. So this side-by-side view means you sort of have to adjust them so that they line up so that you can look at the data sets. Not the greatest way to compare files, but a very easy one if you just want to eyeball it. Similarly, Excel on a PC has some options to compare spreadsheets, kind of like a track changes functionality. That default function does not exist on a Mac. However, I'm a bit of a geek. I like to play with formulas. So what I did was I grabbed a tutorial and built a couple different examples of using formula to compare data sets. And I really just want to highlight what we're seeing on the screen. We'll quickly go over the formula and show how this works. And what I do want to note is using a formula in combination with conditional formatting is what you're seeing to get a really easy way to compare data sets. So to level set before I go into the formula, I have 2 sheets. Compare data set 1. So this is your first data set. Compare data set 2. And we're going to run a comparison of them on this sheet here. So what we're doing is we're using some Excel formula. We're using an if formula. So if you recall from maybe a last Tech Tuesday when we did it, the if formula is if a condition, then do something, else do something else. So we're saying if the data set 1 cell A1 does not equal the data set 2 cell A1, put the value, a string, just changed value, and append that with what's on data set 2. So it's basically saying, are the data values the same? If not, show the value, changed value, colon, and the new value. Otherwise, show the original value. And if we do that and put that in the first cell, we can then use that paste option and paste special option to drag that formula right through the rest of the spreadsheet. And so each cell has a formula that's using an if statement. And what happened is you can see that in this first cell that's highlighted in orange, it's saying changed value and it's showing you the new value. So let's look at cell B3 just to quickly look at it. Cell B3 is Roosevelt, but in the new data set, it's Mason. And so the formula was smart enough to highlight it because there is conditional formatting that looks for the changed value string. And so this whole data set can then immediately be highlighted to say, okay, we have two data sheets, and here's how we can find changes very quickly. And so when you take formulas plus the conditional formatting that I showed earlier, you can do this. And what's really cool about it is this is all within one spreadsheet, but it's really no different if you were to do it with two different files. The only difference that you'll see is when you choose the sheets to compare, you actually just have to go out and have both spreadsheets open, both files open, and select from the other worksheet. So the path to the sheet becomes the file folder, the file, then the worksheet. So it's just a much longer formula, but it's actually the same exact formula. One of the challenges when you're doing cross-file scripting, and maybe you've seen this in the past, and I just want to sort of note it, is if your Excel formulas cross multiple files, when you open up the workbook, you're probably going to see a prompt that's something like, this is using one or more source files. Do you want to update it or not? This is very easy. Just hit don't update, and it will use the values that it has from the other one. But that is a really great little tool in this formula. And I will share the Excel file with the PowerPoint. So maybe this is a tool that you can use as a template if you need to compare data sets. And I'll stop there and start taking some questions. But before I do, just again, we have some tip ups that Vanessa has worked on in the past. So anytime you want to go look at them, we have using trim and clean functions, concatenate and text join, and maybe we'll continue to do some more of these. So I'm gonna stop there, and we will look at the questions and field any additional questions. Okay, just bear with me. That is sorry for the top. There was a question, can I please state when I use Control A, Control C, Control V so we can follow along. It's a little late for that now. I apologize for that, but if I do any future sessions, I will definitely make a note to do when I'm doing select all, copy and paste. Does ITS have a recommendation for LinkedIn Learning? Vanessa answered that she will be sharing some resources. Will there be another session where we go over formulas like the one you just showed and VBA? So to answer that question, I had done a session on formulas. It seemed to be pretty popular. So I imagine Vanessa and my colleagues will ask me to do some more formula sessions. So I'm happy to do more Tech Tuesdays on that, or we can always connect and I would be glad to help you. A question, can you compare data sets that are in two separate Excel workbooks, or do they have to be in the same workbook in separate tabs? So to answer that question, you can do both. The formula is basically the same. It's just your reference to how you point to the cells that change. One will include a file path, and one will just include the worksheet. Can you show original value 1 and changed value number 2? I think I did that, so I think we're all set. If someone has added a whole row, will every single thing below that row show as changed? Yes, I think that would be the case. But I would really have to look at it. So that would be an example we'd want to work through. And I think that's it for questions.
There was one about conditional formatting that was closer to the top. Let me just find it real quick to make sure we got that one. Oh, is there a way to make conditional formatting rules for cells based on contents of other cells? For example, I would like to highlight cells in a question column, but remove the highlight after someone enters a response in the answers column.
Such a great question. So I would really want to test it. I'm too geeky to give you a 100% answer, but from what you're described here, Yes, I would imagine there is a way to do that. You would create the conditional rule that bases on having another value where you say yes or no, did I answer it? So you might have a column that has a question, and then you might have another column, following it or somewhere off to the side with a yes or no. And then as you go through and answer it, you would say change the value to yes, and it would unhighlight it based on choosing yes. So I think there's a way to do that. I don't think it would be terribly difficult if I'm understanding the question correctly. But it would be something I'd be happy to work with you on, to give it a shot. But the way I'm thinking of it is very much like a Zoom webinar where you have questions list and then there's a button that you click to say answered. And I think you would just have to take that action to say yes, I've answered it. But absolutely, I think that could work.
I think that's it for questions now. But thank you everybody so much for joining us. Thank you to Doug for showing us all of these really great features in Excel. For anybody who's around next week, we're going to be having a Tech Tuesday on BioRender, which if you need to basically build diagrams for clinical use and are tired of perhaps using circles and squares in PowerPoint to do it, BioRender is an awesome tool that can help you build scientific diagrams very quickly. So if you're interested in that, I'll be sending out information for you to register for that session as well. Again, I'll be sending out an email to everybody later today with a link to the video recording as well as the resources Doug has put together and some LinkedIn Learning and Skillsoft resources as well. So you'll have a ton of information that you can go through to try out all of these different Excel tips. So thank you again, everybody, for taking the time to be here today. Have a good one.